Every once in a while, in my 20s, I would have almost like a meltdown. And at the time, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know what was going on. But there would be a smell, or there would be a song, or there would be a certain car, or the way that the wind would feel a certain day, or I would have a certain memory from back, when I was 16. And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. And I would just start to cry. And I would cry for maybe 1 or 2 hours, like out of breath. And I couldn't breathe and I couldn't catch my breath. And I would have dreams. And I mean, I would even end up on the floor sometimes, just crying, just crying uncontrollably. Like I couldn't stop crying. Just, just on the floor crying. It was just weird. When I was 10 years old, um, my parents moved to America. And of course, they brought me with them. It was not the first time I had moved, though. I'd actually been moving most of my life because of my parents and their desire to move to the US. So I was actually born in India, and after a few months, we moved to the Middle East. So I was just a few months old. And then when I was 10, my parents made the decision to move to the United States. I did not want to come to the US. We had visited the US before, and I didn't like the US. There was something about America, it just wasn't good. It was just a feeling. And the way that I felt when we had visited America before was that it just wasn't good. It just didn't seem like a healthy place. It didn't seem happy. So at the age of 10, I did not want to move to America, but my parents, it was a big dream of theirs, right? Like most people in the world, they want to come to the US. They want to move to America and live the American dream. So my parents were the same. They were from India. They worked very, very hard to come to America. So we came to the US and my life changed, but not for the better. Everyone assumes you come to America and everything is wonderful. Your life becomes better. Everything in America is great. Everybody in America is wonderful. America is like the most perfect country in the world. That's the belief around the world, especially back in the days. So we moved to the US in 1990. So back then, the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, the belief was that America is the greatest country in the world, that there is nothing better than America, that, if you want to do anything with your life, you go to America. And my parents, unfortunately, my parents believed this, and they fell for that myth because it is a myth. So after we came to the US, my life changed not for the better as America promises, but for the worse. So besides just having your basic culture shock, which is what kind of started in the beginning, was, just the little things here and there that's different about the US that's a little bit shocking. But as the years progressed, it got worse and worse. And it was no longer culture shock, it was a complete culture clash. Everything in America was different. Everything. So I had moved many times before. I had moved from India to Iran to UAE. We had lived in three different cities in the UAE. And nothing bad had happened to me because the cultures were relatively similar. They weren't exactly the same, but they were similar. But in America, it had a Western culture. It was completely different. In fact, in almost every aspect of life, it was the exact opposite of what I had been raised as for the first 10 years of my life. And my parents did not make moving to America easy. They completely just tried to erase our past. They tried to erase my cultural identity. They stopped talking to me in different languages. They only wanted me to speak English. They just completely tried to brainwash me and make me an American. They stopped celebrating Indian festivals. I mean, everything I'd grown up with for the first 10 years of my life. they just stopped immediately. And everything was America, America, America. They just tried to push all of the American way of life on me and forcing me to become American, which was really, it was really not good. So if any of you are moving to America or are moving anywhere else and you have young kids, please don't try to erase your past. Okay, keep your culture alive. So that was a big part of the problem, was that they completely just, there was a huge disconnect between my first 10 years of life and now America, and everything I had to do was different. And in America everything was different. The people were different. The culture was very different. The food was different. The houses were different. Cars were different. Clothes were different. The language was different. So overseas, I was exposed to a lot of different languages. In America, everyone just spoke English. It was just English. And then I had to go to school in the US. So, school in the Middle East, believe it or not, were actually, compared to America, were very safe. In the UAE, when I went to school, we were innocent. At the age of 10, I was still wearing pretty dresses and playing with dolls. And in America, schools, they were crazy. They were violent. The schools were not safe. American schools were crazy. It was chaos. The kids I went to school with, who were my schoolmates, who were my classmates, they were rude. They were disrespectful. There were fist fights in my American schools. I had never had a fist fight in my schools overseas. So in the UAE, I went to an Indian school and we had no fist fights. We had like no fighting except for the stupid, dumb fights that kids have, on the playground just arguing. We had no physical fights. And the worst curse words I knew were stupid idiot. And in America, oh my God, they had such bad curse words. In America, there were fist fights in school. There were drugs. There was smoking. People, children, children, like 11-year-olds. They're having sex. They're doing drugs. And then America, they had shootings. Like there would be shootings. There was a term I heard for the first time after moving to America called drive-by shootings. We didn't have those overseas. So moving to America, it was kind of, in a weird way, in an ironic way, it was sort of like moving into a violent war zone, which obviously we're not at war in the US. But that's what it was like for me, coming from a relatively safe environment in the Middle East, which sounds ironic. But the UAE is, it's a pretty wealthy country. But so coming from the UAE where I didn't really have these issues, and I didn't even know, these issues were not even in my consciousness. I wasn't even aware of some such things. And then we came to the US and it was like going to school. It was violent in school. I was actually physically attacked by other people in school. I had been in school for just a few weeks and this girl physically hit me, and I had never had that happen before. And then my cousins who lived in America, they were our only family in the US. So we actually stayed with them for the first few months. My cousin, they were the same way. They were rude. They yelled. They cursed. They talked back to their parents, who were my aunt and uncle. And then my cousin, she did the same thing. She would hit me. It was just crazy. And it wasn't, everything was different, but it wasn't different in a better way. It truly was different in a worse way, which might come as a shock to some people. I don't know who's listening, but people in India and the Middle East and things like that, they truly believe America is the greatest in the world. They think America is perfect. There's nothing wrong about the US, and that is so far from the truth. It is completely not true. So for me, it was a huge shock. In America, we moved again. So we moved after a year, then we moved after another year. And every time we moved, we went to a different place in the US, to a different state, and I was exposed to different people and different things. As I got older, I had a lot of problems in America. And people I met who I thought were my friends, they were not my friends. I was betrayed by a lot of people I trusted. I thought they were my friends, and they acted like my friends. I even had an incident where it was a boyfriend and a girlfriend. They locked me in his bedroom and were trying to get me to have sex with them, and they wouldn't let me out. So these were people who I thought were my friends because they were acting like they were my friends, and I thought we were friends. And overseas, we would have been friends. I met people who were drug addicts, and I had a lot of very, very traumatic things happen to me. I had an eating problem for a while. People that I trusted took advantage of me. They lied to me. They stole from me. And, and like I said, my parents, I mean, they just completely ignored the situation. It's like they brought me to America and they just like left me here to survive on my own, just figure it out on my own. In fact, the only person who really cared about me was a drug addict. And when I say drugs, I'm not talking about marijuana. I mean, he was addicted to drugs. He was a heroin addict and a cocaine addict. He was the person who cared for me. He was 7 years older than me, so as a teenager, he was the one taking care of me because my parents were not involved in my life at all. Somehow I managed to survive all this. I don't really know how I survived it. I had a lot of very close calls, but I didn't die. I came close, but I never actually died. But I had a lot of very traumatic events happen to me in America. I mean, everything was different. The culture, the people, the thought processes, the way people think, the way people behave, very, very different than how I grew up. Overseas, people think differently and they behave differently. And there's certain thought processes people have overseas that doesn't exist in America. And America is not an innocent country. There's a lot of corruption of the mind. There's a lot of mental health problems. There's a lot of corruption of thought processes, and it's not good. And so as a 10-year-old child, all of that absorbed into me. All of that became part of my psyche, and it damaged me forever. So, somehow I survived my teen years. And then I went off to college and I moved away from my parents. I moved away from the Midwest where I had had all these horrible traumatic things happen to me. For several years in my early 20s, I just kind of tried to make sense of what had happened. I was very nervous. And at the time, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know what was going on. But there would be a smell, or there would be a song, or I would have a certain memory from back, when I was 16. And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. And I would just start to cry. And I would cry for maybe 1 or 2 hours, like out of breath. It was just weird. And throughout all of these years, I always had depression. I always had suicidal thoughts. And I just didn't know what was wrong with me. And I'd gone through many different therapists over the years. Speaking of therapists, it's amazing how many therapists in America have no idea what culture clash is and how it can really screw somebody up. In fact, most of the counselors and therapists I met with had no idea what I was talking about when I talked about moving to America and experience culture clash. They had no clue. They had no idea what I was talking about at all. Well, maybe the 15th therapist or something that I saw, one day I was telling him about some of my experiences, and he asked me a couple of questions, and he said, "Do you ever get startled? Like, do you have a very strong startle response?" And I said, "I guess I do." And he gave me some examples, and I said, "Yeah, I guess I do have a pretty strong startle response." And then he asked me some other questions. He did ask me, I think, a little bit about, like, if you have something like a memory, do you feel like you're back there in that memory at that time and not right now in the present? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, I think you have PTSD. And he was actually the first person who said that to me. And I don't know what it was, but when he said that I have PTSD, something clicked in my head. And I thought, oh my God, I think he's right. I think I do have PTSD. And another person I saw after that She actually talked to me a little bit more in detail, and she said, you don't have PTSD, you have complex PTSD because you had so many traumatic events. You didn't have just one traumatic event, you had so many traumatic events over several years. I mean, like 15 years of traumatic events. So I have complex PTSD, which I didn't realize until I was in my mid 30s. Can you believe that? So I started having these traumatic experiences at the age of 10. My teen years were crazy. I suffered so much during those years. And then, my 20s, I was trying to make sense of stuff. I had no idea what was going on. And then finally, in my early to mid 30s, I was finally diagnosed with complex PTSD. All of this happened from moving to America and that huge culture clash that happened, having no support. It's just crazy. So I moved to America. I didn't want to come, and then I got all these problems. But so moving to America did not make my life better. It improved my parents' life. My parents have a wonderful life. But I am forever damaged after moving to America. When people meet me, they think I'm normal. They don't realize something is wrong with me because I don't have a label on my forehead saying that I have complex PTSD and depression and anxiety, and all of this started after moving to America based on the negative experiences I had in the US. That doesn't say that on my face. So people who meet me, they think that I'm a capable person and they think that I've got my life together, but I don't. I just want people to be aware that moving to America isn't going to solve all of your problems. In fact, you might get more problems. You might have experiences that you never foresaw coming. I know that happened to me. And if you do what my parents did, which is to completely ignore the situation, ignore the person who's affected, it's just going to get a lot worse. So if you're going to move to America, be aware that there's a lot of changes and a lot of differences in America. And a lot of them are not good. People always think our problems will be over in America, but that's not true. Now, if you want money, yeah, come to America. There's plenty of money here. If you want to be mentally happy and healthy and have healthy children and happy children, America might not be the best place for you. Coming to America basically destroyed my life. And it's something that I cannot undo. I cannot undo the damage because it's just become part of me. It's become ingrained. My brain has changed. So I just hope that if you're going to be moving to America and if you have young kids, make sure your kids are taken care of, that they are adjusting well. And if they're not adjusting well, make sure you get them help with somebody who understands how difficult that cross-cultural, how moving from one culture to a culture that's exactly the opposite is, because it really can damage you. A long time ago, I even remember hearing about this immigrant. They moved to America and their child could not handle living in America. And I think it was a boy. It's been so long ago, I can't remember. But he essentially killed himself from moving to America and the culture clash that happened and how much he suffered. He actually killed himself in America. So this stuff is real. The mental damage, the mental anguish, it's real. Every day there's a part of me that's just stuck in the past. It's just stuck in those years where I had a lot of those bad things happen. I'm just not able to move on. People who meet me, they think I'm normal. They think I'm okay. I'm really not. I'm damaged. So just keep that in mind if you're moving to America or anywhere in the world that is very, very different, where the culture is totally the opposite of what you were raised with. Expect problems, especially if you have kids and young kids or 10-year-olds, teenagers. Expect problems because it really it just completely flips your world upside down, and you need to be prepared for that.